Warrior Heroes Legends by 2 Hour Wargame. This is a set of rules by 2 Hour Wargames, a set of rules for fantasy miniature gaming. That pretty much means fantasy miniature wargaming at the skirmish level. You have a certain number of figures, not a high number. Each figure represents an individual hero, creature, monster, wizard, whatever, and the figurines, the miniatures, interact, move, fight, do combat, resolve actions, all in a miniature fashion. That is, not in a board divided in areas, divided by a grid, but in continuous space where you measure distances using a measuring tape. Miniature game, but also with a strong RPG component. So much so that you could almost say this easily as an RPG game with a very well developed combat system. It somewhat really depends on the perspective that you want to put on your experience with this game. Something that I like about this, and I like about other games by the same publisher, is precisely the flexibility that the system has. These are sets of rules which are very rich, very generous in a sense. The designer really put a lot of love in this game in adding a lot of details. However, fear not, when you see a book that is over 100 pages of rules, it is legitimate for you. You're entitled to be scared and afraid. Fret not, this is not the point. The core system is really pretty short, is definitely under the 50 pages, even less than that if you really go down to the details, to the main concepts. That means that you can start playing the game way before you go through the entire manual. I believe you can enjoy the game a lot and do a lot of stuff without ever reading a good chunk of the manual if you do not want to do that. If you just want to have a skirmish, a pretty well-honed skirmish system for miniature wargaming. Then if you want to explore the world that these fights are set in, if you want to learn more about the characters, you want to flesh out the situations more, you want to have more of a landscape, more narrative options, then you can explore the rest of the rulebook, which will tell you how to explore the rest of the game. Sometimes when I look at these manuals, this is not the first manual by 2 Hour Games that I read and play. When I look at these manuals, I almost had the impression that these are small maps of a world. And you can find a corner of a world that you're exploring and enjoy that corner and be pretty happy with that, never know much about the rest. Or you can explore this world and really have a lot of different experiences, face a lot of different challenges, find new things. It's almost like a system that you can choose to play or to inhabit. Your characters really could inhabit this world. There are enough places, locations, details, and things that you can do in the system that you would be able to have like a second life with your characters living in this parallel fantasy world. This is how well developed the RPG component of the game is. But again, up to you. You can use it as a war game, as an RPG, as a combination of the two. The rules allow you to do that. Now, I find the presentation of the rules in this book and in other books by the same publisher outstanding. I love it. I find it excellent. I'm a little baffled when I read or hear that people have all sorts of problems learning these games. They find this presentation not to work for them. I guess there's a subjective component. I really like how it's done because the way the rules are presented here is the very basic concepts are introduced at the beginning of the book. Then other concepts are introduced building upon them, and you get into increasing levels of complexity and depth as the book proceeds. Actually, each section of the book at the end has a small section where the designer encourages you to stop right there and read the little summary that you have here, the summary that gives you pointers about the main concepts that you just learned in the previous section. Also, some of these boxes here encourage you to try things out for yourself. After a certain concept is introduced, you're encouraged to put some miniatures on the table and try out those concepts. Try movement, try reactions, try a certain type of test and see how things go. I see how people would get maybe confused and troubled if they decide to read the entire book from cover to cover and then they start trying. Don't do that. When you pick up the book, pick up also a couple of miniatures, dice, pencil and paper, and create your world, create your character as you go. As the book tells you how to create a character, make your own. Make one, make several. As you're told how to execute combat and movement, try that out as you go. I frankly can't see how things can be too problematic with this rulebook, but people do find it problematic at times to interact with this book, so I'll take that into account. The only reason, the only way in which I see things can be confusing is when it comes to interactions and reactions, which is a key element of the system and is an element of the system that I enjoy very much. The idea is that characters can continuously, or at least very often, react to what other characters are doing. So characters move in group. When a group gets line of sight on another group, and vice versa, now the two groups are in sight of each other, then both groups take a test to see their ability to react and to see if they get extra actions that can be performed right there before the previous action is completed as the groups come in contact. That means that you can have a group moving, both groups take a test to see if they can have reaction actions, then the groups may resolve it. The non-active group may resolve an action first, the other group may go later, then you resolve the rest of the initial action. This is the only time in which the action is not very linear, things go back and forth. But again, and I see sometimes, actually, I'll acknowledge this, there are descriptions where it gives a nutty description of what you may experience in a turn, and the back and forth may feel a little confusing. But if you put the miniatures on the table, you play as you learn, I think the system is pretty easy to absorb. Now, as for some of the main concepts, key concepts of the system, I will not give you too many details because the book is long, so I will just select what I think can give you a good sense of the system in case you do not know games by this publisher yet or haven't picked up this one specifically. An important thing about many 2-hour war games and about this game here is that you have characters controlled by players, and then you have non-playing characters. This happens in many games. Usually the players control their characters, and then very often you have an AI that controls non-playing characters. This is typical, for example, in cooperative games. Here there is something different though, that is the player or players very often controls a character directly. You, quote-unquote, are that character. There's a character on the board which is the projection of you. There's a little marker now there on the board. He is the super coolest warrior wizard that there was. And then there are non-playing characters or semi-non-playing characters that the players control or semi-controls. What does this mean? That was an awkward way of phrasing it. You, the character on the board, are the leader of a party. You have free will, that is, your character has free will. You tell the character, do that, and the character does that. But then you have characters which are less proficient, less trained, less skilled, which are members of your party, and you can control them only up to a certain extent, because there are reactions that they may have, and you roll on tables to determine the chances that they have to do what you would like them to do. So the perspective of the game when you're leading a party of, say, 6 heroes is not like in many other games that you are a floating entity that is reading into the minds of all of the 6 heroes and controlling them all. You're not the group. You really are the leader. And as the leader, you give orders out, you give suggestions, recommendations, you tell people what to do, and you hope that they will do it, but they will not always do it. Sometimes they will duck back, sometimes they will be unable to react because of fear or other effects. I like this very much. It is very unique. You really have the perspective, the point of view of the leader. So you have an influence on the characters on your party that you're trying to control, but there is a degree of chance that you cannot control. And precisely like you would have in a party that you're leading, you do not mind control your characters, the people of your party. You just hope that they do as closely as they are told. So this brings a degree of chaos, no doubt, certainly a degree of unpredictability. If you're a control freak, this is definitely not a system for you, but if you like the idea of a system that creates a strong narratives, a lot of surprises, this is great. I personally love the fact that both some of the parties on your side and then all of the parties of the some of the characters in your party and then all of the characters of the AI are controlled by another system, and you can control them entirely. I like that. I like the narrative feel and the possibilities, the narrative possibilities that come from that. I talked about an AI because another great thing about the system is that it is very flexible in the way in which you play it. You can play it as a duel, head to head, party versus party, human player versus human player, then each human player as a character in a party. You can play it co-op precisely because there are enough tables and systems to control all of the enemies as an AI. Then you can play it as a co-op. The human players are all on the same side, and then the system controls the enemies. This also means that you can play it solo, you by yourself, control your party, and then the system controls the enemies. As for solo, there's another thing that I like very much, which is a random generator of dungeon scenarios. It's a dungeon generator. There's a section of the book that tells you how you can create a random dungeon using conventional playing cards. You do not have to purchase any fancy, strange cards. Shuffle the deck, select a certain amount of cards, and then flip cards, which then you will use, once they are face up, you will use as tiles of a branching dungeon on the table, and depending also on what's on the card that you just flipped and put there as a tile. Certain encounters will happen. There are tables that you roll on. Certain cards will generate certain events rather than others. It's pretty impressive, I find it, that you have a full dungeon generator in the book as one of the many other things that you have. Because definitely if you have a fantasy system, you need a dungeon system. Let's face it, fantasy without dungeons is just not real. It's not what it should be. Mechanically, the game is based on a key concept, which is reputation. Your star character, the leader of your party, and sometimes you divide your party in smaller parties, then the leaders of the smaller parties, of the smaller groups, will use the reputation. Reputation is a value that does not only mean reputation, how famous and popular and liked you are. It also encapsulates other values such as general tactical awareness, effectiveness on the battlefield. And that is used during activations and during reactions. At the beginning of a turn, both sides roll a d6. The player that rolled the highest of the two results goes first, but he will only be able to activate characters in groups led by leaders that have a reputation equal to or higher than the rolled number. Example, a party rolls a 5 and the other party rolls a 2. Then the side that rolled a 5 goes first, but he will only be able to activate leaders that have a reputation of 5 or 6. The other party that rolled a 2 will go next, but will be able to activate the characters that have a value of 2 or higher. So you have an interesting balancing feature there. Also, it means that not all characters will activate every turn. Characters with a high reputation will activate almost every turn, because a character with a 5 will not activate only on a roll of 6, but will activate in all of other cases. Characters with lower reputation may be scared, afraid, not exactly aware of what's going on, insecure, and they can figure it out and will not activate nearly as often. As for the turn flow, once you have determined this, groups activate. As I said, the actions of a group that activates may be interrupted by a test, by the insight test when you get insight of an opponent. There are also other tests called reaction tests that have to do with actions that very often are not voluntary, that have to do with, well, effects of other things that happen on the battlefield. All of these things seem much more abstract than they have to be. I'm trying to give you a general sense. Again, if you pick up the rule book, you start moving miniatures on the table and rolling dice, things will appear clear and obvious in no time. So overall, Warrior Heroes Legends. The art on the cover is good. The book is printed in good paper, good quality, resistant paper. But talking about the content, I like this very much. I liked other games by 2 Hour Wargames before, and I like this one very much. I also am a sucker for fantasy. I like wargaming, I like miniature gaming. All these things go here together, and they go together well. This is a system of great richness, of very good depth. I would say economically deep. When you look at these tables and at the tests that you have to take, it may look confusing. It is not. But then when you see the richness of the action that is generated by this, the richness of the narrative, the wealth of events and situations that will emerge from these mechanics, then you realize that those tables and those mechanics are really economic in the sense that they do generate a disproportionate amount of narrative complexity, of narrative events, of flavor, of story, of theme. Good stuff. If you've never tried a game of this type, I would recommend this one still. May not be the most user-friendly, maybe at the beginning you may be a little bit shocked, but if you can get past the initial shock, this is a system that is really worth exploring. And even if you are just a beginner, you can just pick up a chunk of the game and become familiar with that and play that system, and then you increase by adding layers and layers, different characters, abilities, and skills. If you look at the really core key concepts, this could work as an introductory miniature war game. When you take everything into account, then the entire experience that you can have from this set of rules is pretty epic. Warrior Heroes Legends, a great system for miniature wargaming. If you like miniature wargaming and or RPGs, there is definitely something in this book that you will enjoy. I don't know what that would be, meaning I don't know what is the thing that you will like, that you will pick up as the one that you will enjoy the most, but there's just so much good stuff in it that I would be surprised if a player wouldn't find anything to his liking in here. Good system, fun stuff, give it a try. I definitely recommend it.